Hey guys, it's me, Dr. B, and I'm coming at you with another video. So this is going to be my June wrap-up, or the Tarot Readathon wrap-up. I had a really fun time participating, and I just want to send a special thank you to Daijah and Noelle. So that's Daijah's Book World and Noelle 7 Pages. I will link their channels in the description below, but thank you guys so much for putting together this reading challenge and really making it a lot of fun. It was so fun just to participate and challenge myself to read a ton of books like that I had really been hoping to get to, and I really had a lot of fun with just all the prompts and figuring out like all the prompts that I wanted to submit points for, and just trying to get points and like also trying to mood read and stuff. So it was like just a lot of fun all around. So thank you, very big thank you. And what I would like to do today is kind of talk about like the books that I read. So I read 18 months in the month of June, and what I'd like to do is go over each of the books that I read. I'm actually going to show you the cards that I ended up pulling and then what the prompt is that's associated with that card. And I wanted to show you guys, this was the tarot card deck that I was using. So it's a Teddy Tarot. So for the Team Pentacles upright, every prompt or card that we completed counted for 25 extra points in the Minor Arcana trophy. And you can do this as many times as you wanted. So if you read 30 books, you could submit 30 books and you'd get 25 extra points for every prompt or card that you completed associated with those books. And then our reversed, the TBR must have included one book, at least one book, over 500 pages. And then if you're someone who mostly reads like audiobooks or ebooks and the page counts are kind of wonky, just check Goodreads for the page. So I ended up having a couple of books over 500 pages, so that was no problem for me. But let's get into what books that I read. So during the first week of the Tarot Readathon, my team, I was on Team Pentacles, we got a weekly significator challenge. We got the Two of Pentacles, which is to read a book where the character faces a big decision. For this prompt, I ended up reading 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and it's a chunky one. Okay, this was like 850 pages or something crazy. This book also fit a personal prompt that I drew, which was the 10 of Swords. It was to read a book featuring murder. So 11/22/63 was about essentially time travel and trying to stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which was one of the US presidents back in the 60s. And for this book, I initially bought the book because I saw Haley Pham read it for a Stephen King video that she put together, and it really drew, I was really interested in it because of the storyline, so I decided to give it a shot, and I ended up rating it 4 stars. Definitely a book that I enjoyed. There was a lot of historical fiction. There obviously was some very gruesome kind of horror scenes. There was a subplot of romance, but it wasn't like a huge part of it. It was a lot of going back in time and figuring out what happened and what things would be changed. So kind of a lot of experimenting, and ultimately the book was really good. Highly recommend if you're into historical fiction, very small subplot of romance, and can get through like a 850 page book, because that one took a hot minute to get through, and I had to break it up over several days, and I was listening to the audio with it as well. During the second week of the Tarot Readathon, the weekly significator was the Page of Swords. So this one was to read a book about books. So I was also able to double up with a personal prompt, which is the Fool. because this one was about reading a book by a new to you author. I ended up reading The Dead Romantics, and let me tell you, this book was freaking good. It was such a lighthearted, very fun, refreshing book to read. Very cute. I ended up rating this 5 stars, and I am excited to read Ashley Poston's next book that comes out. I think it actually came out really recently or comes out really soon. So this book follows Florence, who is a ghostwriter for a romance author, and essentially her journey to rediscover love, because she kind of had totally gave up on it. So her editor actually ends up dying, and she is trying to figure out what his unfinished business is and why he's kind of hanging around in limbo. And it's just there's a happily ever after and everything. So definitely highly recommend The Dead Romantics. The third weekly significator challenge was the Knight of Pentacles, and this was to read your most anticipated book on your TBR. And this is where I was able to read a lot of books in 1 week. I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I was able to double up with The Hermit. The Hermit was to read a book that you think you can finish in just a few sittings. And I was totally able to finish The Cruel Prince within a couple of sittings. It was only a couple hundred pages long, and I had already started maybe 15% of it or so before the readathon, so I really wanted to finish the book, and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving the book about 3 stars, but I feel like it was a pretty strong 3 stars, maybe somewhere 3.5. Wasn't the best fantasy in the world to me, but I did really enjoy it, and I ended up picking up the next book in the series, which is The Wicked King, also by Holly Black. And it did fit the significator prompt, so you can submit as many times as you wanted in a week, but it also fit my personal prompt of the 2 of Wands, which was to continue a series you've already started. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I felt like it was a little bit better than the first book, and sometimes the second book in a series is, because the first book is trying to set things up, but this really explored a lot of the politics of the world, and kind of developed a little bit more into the relationship between Jude and Cardin, and the aftermath of the first book. So definitely enjoyed it, and I'm hoping, this is kind of a sneak peek for my July TBR, I'm hoping to get to the 3rd book in the series, which is The Queen of Nothing, again by Holly Black, and I will be reading this pretty soon. The next book that I read for the weekly significator was When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This is also the author of the cheat sheet. I read this for the 2 of Cups on my personal TBR, and the 2 of Cups is to read a book that explores the theme of partnership or the power of 2. And obviously this did explore, it's a romance, so it did explore the power of 2 or partnership, and it's really between a pop star and this guy who's a baker in Rome, Kentucky. It's so funny because when I picked this book up, I thought it was going to be in Rome, Italy, but it ended up being somewhere totally different, which I love. I love that a book can do that, kind of make you think one thing and it's actually going a different direction. But I rated this book 4 stars, a very high 4 stars, I think even a 4.75. I thought it was so good. I even thought the cheat sheet was really good, and I read that in May. So Sarah Adams is definitely an author to look out for. I actually have her next book, which is Practice Makes Perfect, so that's kind of on my July TBR as well, a little sneak peek for you. Another book that I ended up reading for the weekly significator was The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, and this was also for my personal prompt of The Magician. And The Magician was to read a book with magical elements, and obviously this book has lots of magic in it. It literally says on the back that they're picking 6 of the most uniquely talented magicians, and this book was pretty interesting. It was different than my typical reads, and I'm actually pretty glad that I picked it up because it was very interesting. You'll see in a minute, I also read Hellbent, which is kind of along similar lines of a dark academia, but I think I liked this one a lot more. It was easier to understand compared to like Ninth House Hellbent. However, I'll get to those reviews in a second, but I ended up reading the Atlas 6 3 stars. I really enjoyed the different magical elements that were part of this book, like the powers that everybody had, and the character plot lines throughout the story. So there were a lot of chapters that really went into a lot of detail about each character, and it was really interesting to learn about each one. Okay, the next book I read for the weekly significator was The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher. And this is actually a book that my best friend picked out for me in December when she came to visit me, right around the time she told me she was pregnant as well. And this fit my personal prompt of The Chariot. And The Chariot was to read a thriller. So this one was all about a family who like goes next door to a party, and while they're gone, their baby is taken. And so it goes kind of through this whole story of what happened to the baby and where's the baby and like who was involved. I had a couple of issues with this book, unfortunately, and rated it 2 stars. So it wasn't terrible. Like a 1 star would have been a DNF, but 2 stars was, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because there might be something potentially that I didn't find to be maybe accurate or wasn't sensitive or appropriate or something like that. So in my field, we talk a lot about, I'm a mental health professional, and in my field, we often use person-centered language where we say, this is a person who is experiencing, distress from depression, or they have bipolar disorder. Like, not that they are a bipolar or a schizophrenic. Like, we don't use that kind of terminology. We'd like to use person-centered language. And that was one thing that really strongly was a miss for me in this book. I felt like Taryn Fisher did not necessarily do her research in this area, maybe consulting with like mental health professionals, and that really brought down the rating a lot for me, unfortunately. Like the plot, I think the story had the potential to be good, but the execution was not there. So it was really sad for me to say this is a 2 star because I do like Taryn Fisher overall as a writer, but that's like a huge no-no in my book, unfortunately. And finally, the last book that I read for the week 3 significator was Fake Dates and Mooncakes. So this was a book that also fit the Ace of Pentacles prompt, and this was to buy or borrow a book off your wish list, and it's a book that I borrowed from the library, so I'm gonna end up returning it soon. But I originally got this book because of this cute little guy. Oh, you're gonna get the sun. But I got this book because of this cute little guy, and this is a corgi named Clover. If you didn't know, I have a corgi named Daisy. But it is a male-male romance that takes place during a mid-autumn festival mooncake competition between Dylan and Theo, and really just kind of details their like budding romance, and it's just a very cutesy book. I ended up rating it a solid 3 stars. Definitely a book that I would recommend to others looking for a very quick, like it's super short, very quick read that is has LGBTQ characters. Also, if you want a book that features a dog or some sort of cute animal, highly recommend for. So the week 4 significator was Temperance, which is to read a book with an even number of pages. And I was actually able to double dip here because I pulled that prompt and also used it for the significator prompt. So I ended up reading The Blue Bistro by Ellen Hildebrand, and it has 324 pages. It was a, I feel like it was more of like a general fiction, maybe like contemporary romance in a way. It really followed this one girl named Adrian who ends up at the Blue Bistro which is in Nantucket, and it really just follows her story of like getting into the restaurant industry and not really ever having any experience other than hotel experience. And there is like a subplot of romance as well, but it really goes through like all the friendships that she makes and some of the challenges that she faces by becoming the like assistant manager of this restaurant. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It wasn't anything that I hated. It was a perfectly enjoyable beach book, as Publishers Weekly has said on the back here. I actually ended up taking this book to the beach and read it while I was there. I was at the beach for like I think 3 days, and this was one of the books that I read while I was there. The next book that I read for the Significator was Throttled by Lauren Asher, and this fit the Emperor prompt, which is to read a book with a 1-word title. This book was 378 pages. This book ended up following an F1 Formula racer and a teammate of his sister. They get together, so it's Noah and Maya, and overall it was a cute book, but it was only a 3-star for me. Like, the romance was there, like the spice was there, the story was just kind of okay. Like, it wasn't anything I was like dying over, like couldn't wait to keep reading. It actually took me a while to trudge through it, so I only read 2 books at the beach. Okay, so the 5th Significator prompt, which was the very last day of the challenge, we got the Ace of Cups, which is to read a book that will fill your cup with joy. So I was able to get a couple more books in with this prompt. The first being my double up prompt of the Queen of Cups. The Queen of Cups is to read a book that explores non-traditional forms of love, such as platonic or familial love, and to end up reading The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It was so good. I loved reading this story about 2 sisters, twins actually, and one is, even though they're identical twins, one is able to appear as white and kind of lives her life as a white woman, while the other one is not necessarily able to do that. And then they each have their own children, and it just kind of follows from the 60s to the 80s their lives and their children's lives and how they've grown up based on the race or the color, their race or the color of their skin, and just all the differences that people encounter just based on the color of their skin, even being from the same family, even being identical twins. So this was a very good book. I highly recommend this. I've like already told my coworkers that they need to read this because it was really good. The next book that I read for the Significator, I was able to use a personal prompt as well of the 6 of Pentacles, which is to read a book that you received as a gift or a library book. And I chose to read Adultal Lessons by Gabby Hanna, who was a YouTuber, you know, a couple years ago. And this was actually a book that I received for Christmas, maybe 3 or so years ago, and I've just kind of been hanging on to it, waiting to read it. It's a bunch of like little poems and kind of opinions and inner thoughts that she has that really kind of fit her personality. Like, some of it's dark, there's also some themes of mental health in here, but overall it was an okay book. I ended up rating it 3 stars. And the last book I read for the Significator prompt was also one that I was able to double up with, the Hanged Teddy. So the Hanged Teddy, or the Hanged Man, is to read a book with mixed media elements. That could be like text messages, emails, whatever in them. And this book, Meant to Be by Lauren Jackson, had you know, some text messages throughout, and so I felt like that was enough to suffice for the mixed media prompt. But overall, I gave this book a 4 stars. I liked it so much that I ended up buying the alternate hardcover version before they got taken off of Amazon. So unfortunately, you cannot get this book at this moment. I love this cover, and I love the other cover even more. I like both covers, but I don't know if I necessarily need 2 of the same book. So I'm not sure what to do. This one is a romance that follows Josie and Harley, and overall just a very cute like enemies to lovers story, which is my favorite plot line or for romance. So if you're looking to support a author who this is her debut novel, Lauren Jackson. I also have a live sprint show that I did where I interviewed Lauren Jackson. I'll link that up here as well for you in case you're interested in watching that. I will warn you that it is a live sprint show, so there are some dead moments of, you know, we're actively reading the book, but there is a portion where Lauren actually comes on. She had some tech issues, so in the beginning you'll see that I was like frantically just trying to stall, waiting for her to come on, but we just kind of had a brief chat, and it was really nice to have her on, so I hope that you'll check that out as well. There were a few other books that I didn't necessarily double up with a significator prompt because they didn't fit anything at the time, so I read these at various points during the month, so I wanted to share these ones as well. But one of the first books I read this month was for the 10 of Pentacles, which is to read a book focusing on family/legacy. So I ended up reading Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, and I hated this book so much. I gave it a 2-star. Unfortunately, I just felt like there was no chemistry between Declan and Iris. At some point towards the end of the book, it did get better, so it's like only redeeming quality, unfortunately. And I wanted to love this book so much because I liked the fine print. I gave the fine print a 4 stars, but unfortunately, Terms and Conditions fell very flat for me. I don't know if Lauren Asher's for me, unfortunately, and that's okay. We don't all have to like the same authors, so don't come for me. Please don't hate on me or Lauren Asher. I just don't think it was something for me, and that's okay. Not everybody has the same reading tastes. So another book that I read was for the 5 of Cups prompt, reading a book that deals with themes of loss, grief, or disappointment. And I ended up reading You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, but this was such a sad book. Like, obviously I knew kind of what was happening, that Sam had passed away, and Julie was trying to connect with him through his cell phone, and it was just a very sad story. I didn't cry, but I thought it was a very good YA sad story. I gave it 3 stars, and definitely recommend if you're looking for sad books. And this was to read a book that brings you back to a nostalgic time in your life. So I ended up picking A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime by Monica Murphy, and this was a book that focused a lot on like teenage love and kind of what it's like to just be so encapsulated and so in love with somebody as a teenager, like your heightened emotions and everything. And I ended up rating this book 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. I thought that the book was very beautifully written, and I was hooked the entire way through. It kept me very entertained. I actually listened to the audio. Kept me very entertained on a 5-hour road trip back home when I went to North Carolina to visit my best friend. That book was actually for the 6 of Cups, which is to read a book that brings you back to a nostalgic time in your life. So I would definitely recommend reading this book if you're interested in romance. One of the next cards that I pulled was Judgment, and it was actually very exciting to pull this card because it was to read a book that you've DNF'd or a book that you've been currently reading for a long time. I actually started All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata back in like October of 2022 when I went on a trip to visit my grandmother, and I got maybe like 40% through the book and just like put it aside because I wasn't feeling the slow burn. I'm not sure slow burn is really for me, and I was able to feel motivated enough to finish the book in June. I ended up rating this book 3 stars, and honestly it might have been lower, but the ending really did redeem it. Like, I just don't think I'm a fan of slow burns, so that was the first like half of the book was so boring for me. When they finally got together, I was like, okay, I like this. So it was just a 3 stars for me. I liked it, but I didn't love it. The last card that I pulled was the High Priestess, and this was to read a book with a mystery element, and I don't have the book with me because I checked it out from the library, but I ended up reading The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. I listened to the audio along with this book. I rated it 2 stars. It was really boring, unfortunately. Like, it just had such a dumb ending in my opinion. It was not a very thrilling or like kept me interested kind of story, so ultimately ended up being very happy I did not buy the book. And I want to give a quick shout out to some books that I had planned on reading because I pulled cards for them, but I never actually ended up reading. So at any given time I had between 9 to 10 cards pulled, so that I had a good selection of books to kind of choose from and kind of choose between things that really would keep me interested and also would help me like get through some of the significator prompts. Like, if I could double up on anything, I totally would do that. But let me show you the books that I paired with some of the prompts that I had. I'm not going to say too much about these books. I'm just going to show you the prompt, tell you what the prompt is, and show you the book that I was going to read. So it's kind of like an honorable mentions kind of thing. One of the cards that I pulled was the 8 of Pentacles, and this was to read a book where a character learns a new skill or has art in it. So I was going to read There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. I didn't necessarily get all the way through this. I read about 34 pages and it is on my July TBR. Next up is the Knight of Swords. This was to read a book featuring a character on a mission or a quest, and I chose to read the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey, and I'm actually on book 3 of this 5-book series. We have the 7 of Wands, which is to read a book that features a character that is facing a daunting challenge or adversity. So I was going to read Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. It's the 2nd book in the Boys of Tommen series. 6 of Swords. Read a book that has a journey. So that time I got drunk and saved a demon by Kimberly Lemming. The Knight of Wands is to read a book set in a different time period or world than our own, and I was going to read Such Good Friends by Stephen Greco. This is a book that I got for free through Between the Chapters Book Club, Penguin Random House. They sent this to me, so this was something that I am planning to read pretty soon, most likely in July. And then the last card I pulled was the 7 of Pentacles, and I don't have the book immediately with me. I think it is in my stack back there, and it's on the bottom, and I didn't feel like pulling it out. But I was going to read a book that you believe is an investment into you or self-care, and I was going to work on finishing 101 essays that will change the way that you think. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you participated in the Tarot Readathon, what you guys read, what team you were on, if your team ended up winning, if you read any of the books that I read, or just have any suggestions for things that you think I should read in the future. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye!